Shalom, family. This is Judah. I had a brother that wrote in and asked me if I would do a part 2 of the video of David, the undisputed Messiah. That brother was Brother Donald Smith. And again, I got to thinking, because he lit a fire up under me and I couldn't rest, so I had to do it. I want to mention to you guys the problem with understanding Scripture is that in order for you to understand Scripture, you need all the Scriptures. That means all the books. You need Jubilees, Enoch, you need Jasher, and you need Second Baruch. If you don't have a Sefer, I suggest you get one. Without those books, there is no possible way that you could ever uncover the entire truth. So let's get started. David, the Messiah, it's written in the heavens. What the texts say about David. Ezekiel chapter 37 and verse 24 declares, "My servant David shall be king over them, and they shall all have one shepherd." This is echoed in Jeremiah chapter 30 and verse 9. And it reads, "They shall serve their creator David, their king, whom I will raise up for them." This verse clearly affirms David's eternal role. Now that word right there, eternal role, is saying a lot. David's role as king did not end when he went to sleep. His kingship was being written during his life and after, and it was written in the heavens, and it was eternal. That confirms Ezekiel 37. So this verse clearly affirms David's eternal role as king and shepherd. Christians are going to hate me for this, but this lesson will overwhelmingly prove, without any doubt, that Jesus is and was not the Messiah. Now, you guys may have to listen to this again and again and again, and then listen again. This verse clearly affirms David's eternal role as king and shepherd, not metaphorically, but as a restored living figure in the future kingdom. We know what the future kingdom means. This is projecting David to return. That's what we're saying here, in the future kingdom. So where does Jesus fit? Traditionally, Christian theology interprets these verses as messianic, claiming that David is a title or type fulfilled in Jesus. But that interpretation requires a symbolic leap, one that we should rightfully question. If we take the text literally, then David himself is resurrected and reigns. There is one throne, one shepherd, one prince, not two. There has never been two kings sitting or sharing one throne, and there never will be. Now, Jesus, if distinct from David, cannot simultaneously occupy the same throne without contradiction. Now, an alternative view, Jesus as high priest, not king. Some scholars and seekers propose that Jesus functions as a high priest. That's revealed in Hebrews chapter 4, verse 14, while David reigns as king. I'm going to prove this wrong. Preserving the two distinct offices without overlap. This aligns with the Melchizedek priesthood. Psalms 110 and verse 4 attributed to Jesus the Davidic kingships remaining with David himself. Now, this model honors both roles without forcing a merger. That scripture doesn't explicitly support this theory. Now, we all know, two kings cannot sit on one throne. It's not only logical, it's faithful to the text. So if you're reconstructing ancestral truth and divine order, this distinction will be a key pillar. So let's bring Jasher and Baruch into the spotlight. They have a lot to say about David's eternal role and what the true divine order will look like. The book of Jasher, David's legacy and divine favor. Jasher richly expands the lives of biblical figures, and David is portrayed not just as a warrior king, but as one who rules with justice and righteousness. His kingship is depicted as directly sanctioned by the Creator. I want that to sink in for a second. I want y'all to think about this. David, out of all the kings, is the only king that was directly sanctioned by the Creator himself, not any other king. This echoes divine appointment rather than institutional ambition. There is no indication in Jasher of another king arising to replace him eternally. That eliminates Jesus right there, but there's more to come. Reinforcing my interpretation that David's throne is singular and, get this, perpetual. It never ended. He just took a break, but he'll be back. Second Baruch, messianic expectations and the final Redeemer. Second Baruch anticipates a final deliverer, but it never names Yahushua or Jesus. Chapter 70 speaks of a figure who will gather together all the dispersed and restore righteousness. This aligns perfectly with David resurrected, especially in light of Ezekiel's prophecy. Interestingly, Baruch laments the corruption of leadership and false teachings, which might reflect a resistance to institutional theologies that altered the original prophetic intent. Why does that matter? My point that two kings cannot sit on one throne. It aligns with the covenantal clarity that we find in these texts. The source and the role of David and the role of Messiah or deliverer. Ezekiel, eternal king and one shepherd, directly identified as David. In the book of Jasher, righteous ruler chosen by the Creator himself. No indication of any replacement. Again, that eliminates Jesus. Baruch, future Redeemer, restoring Israel, the role aligned with David's return. Now, theological distortions. What if the merging of David and Jesus into one throne was part of the Roman theological shift, which it was, blurring Hebrew prophecy to fit Greco-Roman narratives? That would explain why David's promised reign gets reinterpreted as metaphorical. Why a literal resurrection of David is quietly suppressed or sidelined, and why I, pursuing truth through ancestral restoration, sense that something is off. So let's explore Jubilees. Time as the true sanctuary. Unlike institutional religion that centers holiness in buildings, Jubilees places it in divinely appointed times. Sabbaths, new moons, and Jubilee years are sacred because they align with heavenly rhythms, not human invention. The calendar is solar-based, emphasizing 364 days. A system meant to reflect order and purity. Unlike the corrupted lunar systems adopted later, holiness is tied to obedience to divine cycles, not a physical structure or icons. This means no churches. This echoes my conviction that the Creator never endorsed man-made temples or churches, but rather he sanctified time itself. And yes, David is embedded in that sanctified time. You will see. David's role in Jubilees. While Jubilees doesn't name David directly as eternal king, it sets the framework for his kingship. It emphasizes ancestral obedience, especially through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the very lineage from which David came. It outlines covenantal blessings tied to righteous leadership, which David embodies more than any other monarch. The text anticipates a restoration of Israel through faithful descendants, not through foreign institutions or hybrid theologies. So David's kingship fits naturally into this rhythm. A righteous ruler aligned with divine time. This is deep, y'all. Not a theological construct imposed by an empire. Now, contrast with Romanized theology. Y'all pay real close attention. Here's the elements, and then here's the Jubilees version. Holiness embedded in time cycles. Leadership based on ancestral obedience. Kingship rooted in covenant and prophecy. Worship aligned with Sabbaths and Jubilees. Now here's the Romanized version. Church theology embedded in buildings and rituals based on the ecclesiastical hierarchy, merged with priesthood and divinity, aligned with Sunday and festivals. Why does this matter? My insight that David alone is king finds strong support in Jubilees, and it affirms that divine order is cyclical, not symbolic. That leadership is inherited through covenant, not redefined by empires. That restoration comes through time, not through theology. Now let's weave together Jubilees, Enoch, and 2nd Baruch to uncover how David's eternal kingship fits into the divine architecture of time, prophecy, and restoration. Jubilees, time-based holiness and ancestral authority. Jubilees emphasizes divine timekeeping. You see, all this is about time. Time originates and is still in the heavens. So it emphasizes divine timekeeping. Sabbaths, new moons, and Jubilee years are sacred because they mirror heavenly rhythms, not human inventions. Leadership is tied to obedience and covenant, not institutional powers. The righteous patriarchs are honored because they walked in divine time, not because they built temples or wore crowns. David's lineage, though not named directly, fits into this framework as a covenant fulfillment, a king who must align with divine cycles, not override them. Enoch, celestial gates, and messianic order. Enoch reveals a solar calendar and lunar gates. This is how the sun and the moon works together. Not the moon by itself, but the solar, which is the sun, and the lunar, they work together. Portals through which light and judgment flows. The watchers are condemned for corrupting divine order, while the elect one is exalted as the righteous ruler who restores balance. This elect one is not a temple builder, but a timekeeper and a judge, echoing the kind of kingship David was promised, one that rules in harmony with heaven, not in defiance of it. 2nd Baruch, 12 waters and the final shepherd. The 12 waters represent alternating eras of light and darkness, each tied to historical and spiritual cycles. David's era is one of the bright waters, marked by covenantal faithfulness and divine favor. The final dark water gives way to a flash of light, the arrival of the messianic shepherd, who rules with justice and gathers the dispersed. David's eternal kingship embedded in time, not iconic. David, the text, David's role, and the time connection. Jubilees, covenant heir through obedience, aligned with Sabbaths and Jubilees. Enoch, archetype of righteousness, rulership, mirrors celestial gates and solar cycles. 2nd Baruch, bright water era and future redeemer, part of a prophetic ebb and flow. Ebb is like, this word ebb means like, you've seen the ocean tides, right? How they draw back toward the ocean when the tide is going out. That's what this word ebb is talking about. Why does this matter for us? Again, my insight that David alone is king and that divine leadership is time-bound, not temple-bound. It finds strong support in these texts. They affirm that divine authority flows through obedience and timing, not through buildings or rituals. That David's throne is eternal. This is what we've been missing. It's not what we've been taught. David didn't reign as king and then die and it was over. His kingdom was eternal. They didn't teach us that. So David's throne is eternal because it's rooted in divine rhythm, not institutional theology. That restoration comes through ancestral truth, not through Greco-Roman distortions. This is where the prophetic architecture really starts to sing in harmony. Pay attention. Jubilees, Enoch, and the equinox. Time as divine throne. In case you didn't understand what that meant, time is a throne. They didn't teach us that. They somehow magically vanished that away. How many of us knew that time was considered a throne? Let's keep going. Both Jubilees and Enoch treat time itself as sacred space, not just a backdrop for events, but the very platform of divine rulership. You see how David fits in there? Jubilees chapter 2 verse 9 declares the sun as the great sign for Sabbaths, months, feasts, and jubilees. The spring equinox is the reset point, the day the sun enters its chamber. Psalms chapter 19 verses 4 to 6, marking the start of the 364-day calendar. This day is not counted as part of the calendar year. It's a threshold, a covenantal gate between the cycles. Now, here's the stunning part. The tabernacle of David, Solomon's temple, and Moses' tent were all aligned due east on the spring equinox. How about that? The sun would shine directly into the sanctuary, a heavenly witness to divine order. David's kingship in celestial rhythm. This is why we can't get it right. David's throne wasn't just political. It wasn't just political. It was prophetic and it was astronomical. We missed that. His rule is embedded in the bright waters. This is the reason you need these books. The books they tell you that are forgeries, non-canonical. That's why they tell you that, because they don't want you to get this information. David's rule is embedded in the bright waters of second Baruch, symbolizing divine favor and covenantal justice. His temple designs aligns with the solar gates. We didn't know that. They are aligned with the solar gates of Enoch, suggesting that his kingship was calibrated to heavenly time. Psalms 19, attributed to David, speaks of the sun's course as a bridegroom, echoing the Enochian portals and the equinoctial reset. This means David's throne is not just eternal because of lineage. It's eternal because it's anchored in divine timekeeping. This, my family, is what we're trying to do now by finding the true calendar so we can get into that rhythm of timekeeping. All numbers, no days, no names of months, but simple timekeeping. Venice edition of Jasher, which this is a hard book to find, and when you find it, it's not easy to break down. I did the best that I could with it, so bear with me. The Venice edition of Jasher, Moral Legacy of David. The Venice edition of Jasher, 1625, while not ancient, it offers an expanded moral narrative about David. It portrays him as a righteous judge, a humble servant, and a defender of covenantal truth. His battles are framed not just as military victories, but as spiritual confrontations, echoing the 12 waters of Baruch. Though not canonical, it reflects a deep reverence for David's role as a moral archetype, not just a monarch. How about prophetic harmony? The text, David's role, and time connection. Jubilees, covenant era. Spring equinox, resets calendar. Enoch, archetype of righteous rulership. Solar gates, and the 360-day rhythm. Second Baruch, bright water era. Cycles of judgment and restoration. And last but not least, Jasher, Venice, moral exemplar, echoes divine time, justice, and ancestral truth. Let's map the connection of David's eternal kingship to the Enoch portals and the 12 waters of Second Baruch. It reveals a stunning prophetic symmetry. Let's map this out, connecting David's eternal kingship to the Enochian portals and the 12 waters of Second Baruch. Reveals a stunning prophetic symmetry. Enochian portals, celestial architecture of divine rule. In First Enoch, especially chapter 72 and 75, the sun and moon pass through 12 portals, 6 in the east and 6 in the west. These aren't just poetic metaphors. They're celestial gates that mark the sun's movement across the horizon throughout the year. The spring equinox occurs when the sun rises in the fourth eastern portal, marking the start of the divine calendar. This portal is the reset point, the moment when the light and time realign with heaven's rhythm. David's temple aligned due east would have received the equinoctial sunrise directly into his sanctuary. You think that was a coincidence? Affirming his kingship as calibrated to divine time and not human tradition. 12 waters of Second Baruch, rhythms and restoration. Baruch's vision of 12 alternating waters, 6 dark, 6 bright, mirrors the 12 portals of Enoch. You see what I mean when I say you need all these books? When you get all these books, your questions will become very limited because your understanding will increase. The reason you ask so many questions is because you have so few books. Most people, ignore these books because they've been told these are forgeries. These are pseudepigrapha. Why do we trust the enemy? After everything we've witnessed from the enemy, we still are leaning to trust him. Baruch's vision of 12 alternating waters, 6 dark, 6 bright, mirrors the 12 portals of Enoch. They connect. Element, Enochian portals, Baruch's 12 waters. Number, 12 portals, 6 east, 6 west. 12 waters, 6 dark, 6 bright. Let me say that again. Number, 12 portals, 6 east, y'all listen now, 6 west. 12 waters, 6 dark, 6 bright. Think about it. Function, tracks solar movement and seasons, represent historical cycles of judgment and favor. Reset point, spring equinox, portal 4. Final bright water before Messiah's arrival, David. Symbolic meaning divine order and celestial justice, prophetic rhythm, and exile and restoration. Both systems reflect divine cycles, not static symbols. They show that time itself is the throne, and David's reign is embedded in that throne. David's throne anchored to celestial justice. David's kingship isn't just political. It's prophetic and, get this, astronomical. His rule aligns with the bright waters of Baruch, eras of righteousness and divine favor. His temple design reflects the solar gates of Enoch, suggesting that his throne is literally synchronized with heaven. Psalms 19, attributed to David, speaks of the sun as a bridegroom emerging from his chamber, a poetic nod to the Enochian portals. Why does this matter for restoration? You're not just reclaiming ancestral truth. You're recalibrating the throne of righteousness to its original rhythm. And if y'all haven't noticed, how many times does that word show up? Rhythm. It's key. David reigns eternally. His reign is not over, y'all. This is a temporary set. He will be back, and he will and is the Messiah. This proves it. David reigns eternally because his kingship is woven into the fabric of divine time. You cannot move him out of that. The Enochian portals and Baruch's waters are not separate systems. They're prophetic harmonies pointing to the same truth. This exposes how Roman theology and pagan architecture distorted the original blueprint, replacing celestial rhythm with institutional rituals. David's eternal kingship aligns with Enoch's calendar and the Jubilee cycles. Let's chart how David's eternal kingship aligns with the Enoch calendar, equinox gates, and the Jubilee cycles and Jubilees. This is where prophetic timekeeping and divine rulership converge. Spring equinox, the celestial reset. In first Enoch, the fourth eastern portal marks the spring equinox, the day when the light and darkness are balanced. This isn't just astronomical, it's the divine reset point, and David is right in the smack middle of it. It begins the 364-day solar calendar used in Enoch and Jubilees. It's the day the sun enters its chamber. Psalms 19, verse 4 through 6, symbolizing divine order. David's temple, remember, aligned due east. You can't make this up. Would receive the equinoctial sunrise. This affirms his kingship as synchronized with heaven's rhythm. This means David's throne isn't just political. It's anchored in celestial architecture. It's in the heavens. Jubilee cycles and Jubilees, time is covenant. Did y'all hear me? Time as covenant. A Jubilee is every 49 years, 7 times 7, marking release, restoration, and return. Jubilees treats these cycles as sacred time gates. All this is about time, where divine justice resets, and get this, history. What does that mean? It will definitely repeat itself, but on a much broader scale. You will have the same king that was directly anointed and selected by by Yah himself. David was the only one selected like that. The entry into Canaan began the Jubilee clock around 1416 BCE and some traditions count 70 Jubilees to the final restorations. David's reign, 40 and a half years, mirrors this rhythm. 7.5 years in Hebron, then 33 years in Jerusalem. This matches the 40 and a half Jubilee cycles. Christians claim Yahusha reigns in heaven, suggesting David's earthly reign was a prophetic type of heavenly rulership. But that is a lie. 12 waters of second Baruch, rhythmic restoration. The bright waters represents eras of righteousness. David's era is one of them. The final bright water precedes the messianic flash of light, echoing the spring equinox gate in Enoch, the moment of divine reset. So the Enochian portal, the Jubilee cycle, and the bright water all converge on one truth. David's kingship is embedded in time-based holiness, not temple-based rituals. Prophetic blueprint, element, Enoch calendar, Jubilee cycles, and second Baruch waters. Reset point, spring equinox, portal 4. Every 49 years, Jubilee, final bright water before Messiah, David, symbolic role, celestial gate of divine order, restoration and release, righteous era and prophetic climax. David's alignment, temple faces equinox sunrise, reigns 40 and a half years, mirrors Jubilee count, bright water era of covenant favor. This concrete evidence of David being the absolute true Messiah, this cannot be disputed. The reason we miss this is because we don't have the right books. David's future was written in the heavens, and it connected to Jasher, Jubilees, Enoch, and Baruch. It was right there the whole time. No wonder they tell you, don't read that book. It's pseudepigraphal. You wonder why. It's your enemy. That's why. And with this information, which is what they didn't want you to have, burst the truth wide open. David, the undisputed Messiah. Shalom.